So today we have an amazing opportunity to spend some time with Letitia Ohneefa. She's a good friend, and also she's someone who loves children. Her main occupation is raising young leaders for tomorrow. They work hard to build the confidence and skill level of young people so that they are gems for the next generation. And they are gems who are going to move not just their own lives forward, but the nation forward as well. So we are with Letitia Ohneefa of Lead Afrique. And today we are going to have a very interesting discussion. We are going to discuss being able to build the self-confidence of children, bearing in mind that they are Africans. And that's going to be our line of discussion. I look forward to having an exciting time, and I hope that you'll enjoy the conversation as well. Letitia, it's good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is in and out of my comfort zone, so we'll see how it goes.
Really?
But I'm excited though.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly excited because it brings both of our organizations together.
Yes, indeed. We
You-
collaborate a lot.
Yes, we collaborate a lot.
Yeah.
So it's good to have that on camera today. Yes. You've been an amazing mentor to some of our mentees on the program. And it's been good to have you. And you've always supported our work and encouraged us, and we are extremely grateful.
Thank you too for letting me in your space.
So, affirming the African child's identity. That's what we're looking at today. And just as an opener, do you think this is an important topic?
The simplest answer is yes. Absolutely important. I think everything we do and become is rooted in an identity, right? And identity is multifaceted. You can look at identity in terms of a personality, in terms of a person, like the family that you're born into. So there's a nuclear family's identity, and then there's the extended family's identity, then there's a societal identity. Even the church that you go to has an identity because there are different beliefs and systems that they buy into. They're narratives for the church. They have philosophies that we buy into. So even the school we go to has an identity. The and so on and so forth. Every work that you go into has a different culture, has a different identity. And we're an embodiment of all of these. And we make decisions and take decisions based on our self-concept. And this self-concept is wrapped up in all of these different identities. So it's very important that we affirm the African child and let them know that they're good enough. And they are good enough. Otherwise, they think otherwise. So for me, it's very important that we affirm the child.
And I'm wondering, sometimes I ask myself, is this a cause worth pursuing when you think about the current trends of pushing the global agenda, the fact that we are one big global family, and we want to discourage racism. How do we, balance all of that? Is this discussion still on point? Are we supposed to become less African and more global?
This is how I would answer this question. I don't think we should become less African. Because think about it. Research upon research upon research states that, in fact, we can house and welcome and host every other nation within the African continent.
Yeah.
So it is important. We have something that we need to be proud of. Today I was researching or reading on the top 20 richest countries. They don't have anything more than we do. In fact, we have more than they do. And yet, we cannot state for a fact we're not amongst the top 20. There's a bit of we need to rethink, recondition every single person. Because I think as long as I can remember, I had this cousin who for the life of me wanted to travel so badly, spend so much money, doing all manner of things just to travel. And he never did. I think about some of the money that, because I was aware of some of it, I think about the money that was invested in his supposed going to look for greener pastures. If he had started a water company, he'd be so rich by now. But there's this, as long as I can remember, look, it sounds like the African dream is to travel to look for greener pastures, sadly. It's still very prevalent today.
I think even more so.
Yes. Sadly, because well, when I went to school, when I was going abroad for school, for example, I didn't need SATs, I didn't need TOEFL, I didn't need any of that because our education system was very much respected. Today, it is no longer respected. Sadly, we're not allowed to say it because we've politicized everything. But our education system is not as it was before. So everybody is looking at, where do I send my child? Because I want them to have a better life. I want to give them an unfair advantage, if you will, or some level of advantage. What do I do with that? See, everybody's looking to go to school. Everybody's looking to do something outside of the norm. And unfortunately, we only see outside of the country. But there's so much to be done here. When you go to the airport sometimes, you notice a number of people would come in, foreigners would come in, and some without suitcases, into our country to work. Give them about 3 months. That situation has changed. So we have a lot of value. We have a lot of resources. Unfortunately, we've conditioned ourselves otherwise. So the legacy of colonialization lives with us. And we haven't been able to recondition ourselves to take it out. So our collective consciousness has built up this African who feels inferior to the foreigner. And sometimes it could be a foreigner, a neighboring country. It doesn't even have to be somewhere in Europe. It could be just a neighboring country, somebody who speaks well than they do, somebody who projects themselves better than they do. And suddenly this sense of inferiority complex sets in and they're stricken into inaction. They can't do anything. Yeah.
And you spoke about our educational system. So currently there is, the regular education system and the local educational system, and then we also have the international schools. And I may be wrong, and you can correct me here. I suspect that could be part of the problem. So to give you an example, my daughter was in a school, and they used to have International Day or something like that. And so they took time off to learn the national anthems of different countries. Parents were asked to dress their children in the garb of another country. I won't mention which country it was. But my daughter came home zestfully singing the national anthem of this other country. And she was clueless about the national anthem of her own country. And when I approached the teacher and said, this isn't bad, but I'm worried that, you are conscientizing my daughter to so love another country compared to her own country, which she currently lives in. The teacher told me, well, this is an international school. I'm not sure what that exactly meant, but I was thinking, isn't this part of the problem? Aren't we conditioning our children through the educational system to become less, or to think of their own country less, or their own identity less, and to hail another's identity more?
I understand. Okay, so I appreciate where you're coming from. My thing with the schools, or I like to think that we can only control something. So I have control over my children, right? Because my children have moved a number of schools, and my conclusion is that you have control over your children. So what is that model? What is that curriculum, if you will, that you're going to build at home to complement that of the schools? Because sadly, we have very limited, even though we have all the tiering, We still have very limited schools that we can send our children to, for that matter. I contemplated homeschooling my children. I know people who homeschool their children as well today. There are pluses and minuses to all of the systems. So what I say is, what surprises me, in fact, about the international schools is that the history of Africa is in the curriculum, but we choose not to take it as a core subject. But it might be an unconscious bias. So maybe something that hopefully this conversation can begin to create awareness about. Because I learned it. I learned that, so I was surprised. So I did some research and I learned that it was one of the subjects that we can select. But sadly, our country doesn't, the schools in our country do not select those subjects. I think there's only one school, if I'm not mistaken, that writes, does anything with African history. Just one.
And that's heartbreaking.
Yes, it is heartbreaking.
They are. I have to be careful how I put this, but the truth is, these schools are profit-making industries, and I'm thinking our government would care, because they are not just, they are not just making money and giving us revenue through tax. They are also educating our populace. And I was thinking our government should care what the young people are being fed, but it doesn't look like we see too much of that.
Checks and balances.
Yes.
Well, there are checks and balances, but I think it's what we're prioritizing. Yeah. It's what we're prioritizing. So what do we want to prioritize? And as parents, we need to have a bit more say in that. And if you can't get yourself or negotiate that for your children where they are, then you must create one.
You must create it.
They must at least understand where they're coming from. It's important, it's critically important, because what they think about themselves, we talk to ourselves a lot more than we speak to any person. And see, what we keep telling ourselves daily has an impact on our identity. And your identity is like an anchor. It must be rooted in something. If I say that I'm a Christian, because it's one of the identities, then my anchor is the fact that I'm created in the image and likeness of God. That's where my source of power comes. So as a human being, I know that when it comes to spirituality, this is my anchor, this is my grounding. For a child, you want to know that this is my family's, this is my anchor. So whether it is a value system that you've created at home, a culture that you've created at home. So what could a culture be? A culture could simply be what you subscribe to as a family or as a group of people. So in my house, we do ABCD, but we don't do DE. And then everybody knows, everybody's aware. We use certain language, we don't use another, because language in itself is beautiful and it's a source of identity, because when you speak, people can tell that you're from here, you do this, you're from there. There were schools once upon a time where they would speak and you know that, they're from that school. You could definitely tell what school, guess, and your guess will be right. Today, we don't have those. But I think it's also the fact that we've bought into too many narratives that are not truth.
Where do we hear those narratives from?
It's part of society, yeah. So you're giving birth to, nobody asks you to cry, you cry. You have a source. You come into the world, if you didn't cry, we wouldn't have brought you home, right? But suddenly you're crying and everybody says stop. So there are learned and innate personalities, behavioral traits that we all have. And sometimes the conflict between the learned and the innate can be so difficult as you're growing up. And for children, and I think we all went through, especially when you're moving from the tweens to the teens, you're trying to carve out an identity for yourself. Now you're looking at, this is what my parents have told me, this is what society has told me, this is what school has told me. Is it true? What is true about it? So that's partly why parents struggle with teenagers. They're going through a process. Meanwhile, their hormones, this is a stage where their hormones are also raging. The part of their brain that makes all the risky decision has developed. The part that makes the rational decision is yet to develop fully. So in going through,
Developed till about age 20 something.
thank you.
So
Imagine that process. If they are not grounded in some identity, with everything happening, like today we have how many genders? We started with just 2, male, female. Now we have God knows how many, and it changes every day. So if your child is not rooted or grounded in some level of identity that comes from the family, that comes from home, you're likely to give them, there's likely to take others, because they are so associating with everybody globally. Now they're playing games across.
Yes.
Chess is played globally now online. A number of other games are played globally. So as you're engaging other people, your language, your dialect is changing. Your perceptions are changing. Your behavior is changing. And it's daily. It's a daily act. Unless we do root our children in some level of, this is who you are, when everything is stripped away from you, this is who you are, we will continuously, and even adults are going through it. I think peer pressure is even now more amongst the adults than the children. And it's an identity issue.